Black Hollow wasn't the kind of town where strange things happened, until the dead started coming home. On this cold October night, the Graves family sat huddled in their dimly lit living room, whispering in frantic, hushed voices. Candles flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls, the wind howled against the windows, and every creak of the old wooden floor sent shivers down their spines. Then, a knock on the door. Claire Graves clutched her daughter, Emily, tightly. Her heart pounded in her chest as her brother David cautiously approached the door, shotgun in hand. He inhaled sharply before opening it. Standing there, wearing the same suit he had been buried in, was Michael Graves. His shoes were muddy, his hair a little disheveled, but his face was perfectly normal. Alive. No sign of decay, no missing flesh, no hollow sunken eyes. He looked like himself. Except, he shouldn't be standing there. Claire? Michael's voice cracked, confused. Why is everyone acting so weird? Claire screamed. David fired a warning shot. Emily fainted. The neighbors rushed outside to see what the commotion was, and soon, the entire town knew Michael Graves had come back. Sheriff Tom Hanley, a man who had seen his fair share of crime, sat at his desk, staring at the very much alive Michael Graves. A steaming cup of coffee trembled slightly in his hands. All right, he exhaled. Let's go over this one more time. Michael looked annoyed. I don't know what you want me to say, Sheriff. I woke up in my bed this morning, and everything seemed normal. Then my wife starts acting like she saw a damn ghost. Next thing I know, I'm in here being interrogated. Sheriff Hanley rubbed his temples. Michael, you died? 3 days ago. We had your funeral. I was there. Hell, I gave the eulogy. Michael's face went pale. What? He whispered. Meanwhile, across town, paranormal investigator Jackson Nightfall and his partner, Gia Kim, a sidekick with a sharp tongue and a caffeine addiction, pulled up to the sheriff's office. Jackson, stepping out of his black 1970s Chevy Impala, muttered, All right, Gia, what's the weird meter saying? Gia took a deep breath, closing her eyes. The moment she touched the sheriff's office doorknob, her vision blurred. The room around her flickered, like an old TV screen struggling to stay on one channel. She gasped. Something was wrong. Reality itself felt split. Jackson watched as Gia's face twisted in discomfort. Yep, he sighed. That's never a good sign. They walked inside. The sheriff, relieved to see them, immediately shoved Michael Graves into their hands. Fix this, he pleaded. I don't do zombies, ghosts, or whatever the hell this is. Michael, frustrated, waved his hands. I'm not a damn ghost. Gia stared at him, eyes narrowing. No, you're not. But something about you isn't right. Jackson, never one to waste time, made a bold decision. We need to dig up Michael's grave. Midnight. The town cemetery. A small, nervous crowd gathered to watch as the grave was unearthed. The coffin lid was carefully pried open, revealing Michael's body, perfectly preserved. The townspeople screamed. Someone fainted. Another man ran for his life. Michael Graves, the one standing next to them, stared at his own corpse. Well, that's new, Jackson muttered. Gia, ignoring the chaos, reached out and touched the body. The moment her fingers brushed against the cold skin, her vision exploded. She saw it. The moment Michael had died. But something had copied him. Right before his last breath, something tore a piece of his existence and brought it back. Michael wasn't resurrected. Michael was duplicated. And whatever did it wasn't done yet. Jackson, still shaken from seeing Michael's perfectly preserved corpse, pulled Gia aside. Okay, just to be clear, he whispered. We are dealing with some kind of undead nonsense, right? Because my usual problems are unpaid parking tickets and drunk farmers riding cows through Main Street. This is a bit out of my depth. Gia pinched the bridge of her nose. No. Not undead. Not a ghost. Something else. Meanwhile, Michael stood near his own grave, arms crossed, scowling. I can hear you guys, and I'd really appreciate it if someone explained why the hell I'm both dead and alive right now. Jackson sighed. Let's start simple. Where were you before we picked you up? Michael frowned. I told you. I woke up in the hospital morgue. Last thing I remember was being in my car, then nothing. And now I'm here. Jackson glanced at Gia. The sheriff said they found him wandering outside town. Like, not a scratch on him. That doesn't make sense, does it? Gia shook her head. None of this makes sense. Which means we need proof. Jackson pulled out his phone and called up the hospital's security footage. He fast-forwarded to the night Michael returned, and there it was. Michael's body sat up in the morgue. Just for a second. Then it collapsed again. The coroner's assistant? Passed out instantly. The janitor? Ran away so fast he left behind a mop and a questionable puddle. Michael, watching the footage, went pale. I don't remember that. But then Gia noticed something. Near Michael's body, on the metal table, sat a small key. Jackson and Gia checked Michael's belongings. Sure enough, the same unmarked key was in his jacket pocket. What does this open? Gia asked. Michael shook his head. I have no idea. It wasn't mine before I, died. Jackson turned the key over in his hand. Only one way to find out. He slipped it into his pocket. Unbeknownst to them, something outside the window watched. Later that night, Gia sat in her motel room, staring at the ceiling. Everything felt wrong. Then, a shadow moved outside her window. A figure stood there. Still. Silent. Watching. Her heart pounded as she reached for her phone. She slowly pulled back the curtain. Michael was standing there. But Michael was also still locked up at the sheriff's office. Gia let out a strangled yelp, scrambling backward as the figure outside smiled. Then, it vanished into the fog. Jackson nearly crashed his car getting to Gia's motel. Okay, just to recap, he said, running a hand through his hair. There's 2 Michaels. And one of them enjoys lurking like a creep in motel parking lots? Gia crossed her arms. That's the takeaway you got from this? Jackson turned to Michael, who looked genuinely disturbed. You swear you have no memory of this? Michael shook his head. I don't know what's happening. I don't even know if I'm really me. The 3 of them sat in silence for a moment. Then Jackson pulled out the mystery key. Whatever's going on started before you woke up in that morgue, he said. We find what this opens, we get answers. Michael, still rattled, nodded. I do have a storage unit. Jackson and Gia exchanged glances. 10 minutes later, they arrived at an old self-storage facility on the edge of town. Michael used his spare storage unit key to let them inside. The mysterious key fit a rusted old locker at the back. Inside? A pile of old newspapers. Each article told the same eerie story. In different towns, over decades, people had returned, days after their funerals. Some lived normal lives. Some vanished without a trace. And some changed. Michael gulped. I'm not the first. Jackson slowly exhaled. Oh, fantastic. A long history of people coming back from the dead like it's a bad sequel. Gia flipped through the articles, then froze. Wait. This name, right here. She pointed at an article from 1952. Jackson leaned in. His face paled. Because the man in the article looked exactly like Michael. Gia's finger trembled on the 1952 newspaper clipping. Jackson grabbed it and stared hard. The resemblance wasn't just close. It was exact. The man in the article, his hair, his jawline, even the tiny scar near his eyebrow, was a perfect match for Michael. Okay, Jackson said slowly, exhaling. So, either Michael is a time traveler, a vampire, or we're in the worst case of déjà vu ever. Michael's hands curled into fists. That's not me. It can't be. Gia skimmed the article. Mysterious reappearance of local man. Claims memory loss. Friends insist he died in a car accident. Police baffled. Hold on, it gets weirder. she muttered. They say this guy, Michael's long-lost clone or whatever, was acting off before he disappeared. People noticed subtle changes, like he forgot his childhood home. His own mother said something felt empty about him. Jackson snorted. Yeah, sounds like Michael before his first coffee. Michael ignored him, his pulse pounding. He grabbed another article. This one was from 1987. Another man. Another eerie return. Same confused expression in the grainy photo. Michael swayed on his feet. I don't understand. These men all look like me? No, Gia said, her voice small. They are you. Jackson let out a nervous laugh. Right. Cool. So, who wants to drive straight into the ocean? Michael clenched his jaw. This is insane. These guys, these other Michaels, they're just random people who happen to look like me. Gia hesitated. Then why do they all have the same story? Dead. Buried. Then just back. Jackson rubbed his temples. You know, I signed up for ghost stories, maybe a haunted doll. Not whatever the hell this is. Michael turned away, breathing heavily. I'm not one of them. I would remember if I was. Gia bit her lip. Would you? Silence. Then Michael shuddered. We need to. Bang. Something slammed against the storage unit door. Everyone jumped. Jackson swore. Please tell me that was just the wind. Bang. Gia reached for the metal latch. I'll check. Michael grabbed her wrist. His face was pale. Don't. Jackson's stomach twisted. Yeah. Seconding that. They stood still, listening. Nothing. Gia exhaled and flung the door open. The lot was empty. Except a single muddy footprint in front of the unit. A bare footprint. Michael stared at it. That's my shoe size. They drove back in tense silence, the storage unit's eerie findings gnawing at them. Michael's reflection in the car window made his stomach churn. Was he really looking at himself? Or just a copy? Jackson pulled into Gia's driveway, threw the car in park, and exhaled. Okay. If anyone suggests splitting up, I'm punching them in the face. Nobody laughed. Inside, Gia powered up her laptop. I want to try something. She turned to Michael. Ever been hypnotized? Michael blinked. What? No. I mean, maybe at a lame birthday party once, but Gia grabbed a pendulum necklace and dangled it in front of him. Michael frowned. That's a piece of your car's rearview mirror. Gia shrugged. Improvise, adapt, survive. Jackson leaned back. Oh, this is gonna be good. Michael rolled his eyes but sighed. Fine. What do I do? Just relax. Gia's voice softened. Breathe in and out. Michael's eyes followed the pendulum. His shoulders slumped. His eyelids fluttered. Then he spoke. But two voices came out. One was his. Terrified. The other? Cold. Empty. The body remains. The mind is borrowed. Jackson almost fell out of his chair. Gia's eyes widened. Michael? Michael's head snapped up. His pupils were blown wide, his breath shallow. Then, in a voice that wasn't his, he murmured, I am not the first. Gia shivered. Then who are you? Michael screamed. The trance snapped. He gasped, hands clutching his face. Gia reached for him, but then she saw the mirror behind him. Michael's reflection was still staring. And it was smiling. The air in Gia's house felt thick, like breathing through damp cloth. Michael sat on the couch, gripping the sides of his head, his breath coming in sharp gasps. Jackson kept his back pressed against the wall, gripping a baseball bat he had absolutely no idea how to use against whatever this was. Gia, still staring at the smiling reflection, did the only logical thing. She threw a pillow at it. Yeah, that'll show him, Jackson muttered. The pillow passed through the glass, but the reflection remained, grinning. And then, slowly, it turned to face them, even though Michael had not moved. Michael's fingers twitched violently. His body convulsed, like something inside him was rearranging itself. Then, his head shot up. I remember now. His voice was flat. Hollow. Jackson lifted the bat instinctively. You, wanna elaborate on that before we start swinging? Michael blinked, his pupils still unnaturally wide. It let me go. His gaze drifted toward the window, then lower, as if looking through the floor. His voice dropped to a whisper. But something else is still down there. Gia's blood ran cold. What do you mean, let you go? Michael's body jerked violently forward, his mouth opened, but his face wasn't moving like a normal person's. It was like a puppet being controlled by something unseen. His lips curled back, revealing too many teeth. His voice came out layered, like multiple people speaking at once. It doesn't need the originals. Jackson and Gia exchanged a horrified glance. Then, without warning, Michael collapsed into dust. A full-grown man, their friend. 1 second there, the next, a pile of ash on the carpet. The room fell into a stunned silence. Gia pointed at the ashes. I'm sorry, but did we just witness an evaporation? Is that a thing now? Jackson swallowed hard. We should go. Gia nodded wide-eyed. Yeah, we should definitely go. Less than 10 minutes later, they were standing in the cemetery, staring at Michael's grave. Still closed. Still undisturbed. Jackson pointed. See? Still buried. That means we're hallucinating. Maybe there's a gas leak. Maybe I got possessed. Maybe. Shut up, Gia snapped. She pulled out her phone and replayed the footage from the night before. Michael crawling out of the dirt. The camera never lied. But the body's still down there, Jackson whispered. A crack echoed in the air. Both of them turned. From the woods, another Michael stumbled out. His face was hollow, his eyes unfocused, as if he was seeing through multiple realities at once. His lips parted. I remember now, he whispered. Gia took a step back. Nope. We're not doing this again. Michael swayed. His fingers twitched like a marionette. His expression flickered between relief and terror. It let me go, he repeated. But something else is still down there. Jackson's jaw clenched. Yeah, we got that part. Michael shuddered, then his skin cracked like dry paint. Jackson swore. Gia grabbed Jackson's sleeve. He's about to. Michael disintegrated into dust. Again, Jackson let out a strangled noise. Nope, this is not normal. Gia ignored him, pulling out a small folding shovel from her backpack. Jackson gawked. Why the hell do you have that? I go on hikes, she snapped. Also, we need to dig. Jackson groaned but grabbed a bigger shovel from the nearby groundskeeper's shed. If some grave demon grabs my ankle, I'm suing the supernatural. Together, they dug deeper than a grave should go. The dirt was damp, but the smell was worse, like mildew and something ancient. Then, Jackson's shovel hit empty air. He froze. They peered into the black void beneath Michael's coffin. It wasn't just a grave anymore. It was a tunnel. An impossibly deep tunnel, leading into the darkness below. Gia's breath hitched. She swayed slightly, as if something was pulling her mind forward. Jackson grabbed her shoulder. Nope. Don't do the spooky trance thing. Snap out of it. Gia shivered. There are hundreds of minds down there. Jackson paled. I don't like what that implies. Then, from deep within the hole, a voice whispered. Another will come. A gust of freezing wind erupted from the tunnel, carrying the sound of faint laughter. The dust settled at their feet. Jackson and Gia stood frozen, watching the last remnants of Michael drift into nothingness. Gia swallowed. Okay. New rule. No touching dead people. Or former dead people. Or re-dead people. Jackson was too busy staring at the empty space where Michael had stood. That's it. We're finding out what the hell is going on. Right now. They retraced their steps, following the clues that had led them this far. The town records. The cemetery. The mine. They needed answers. In the dusty archives of the town library, tucked between forgotten files and yellowed newspaper clippings, they found it, the real story behind the mine collapse. Over 100 years ago, miners working beneath the town broke into a hidden cavern, one that wasn't supposed to be there. A void of total darkness. A space where sound died and the air felt wrong. And then, they started disappearing. Not all at once. One by one. A man would step away for a moment, into the dark, and come back strange. His voice just a little off. His face just a little wrong. His movements not quite human, until the real one stopped coming back at all. The records were vague. The town covered it up, burying the mine under the cemetery, sealing the entrance forever. But one detail stood out. Some returned, but they were not alone. They walked twice. Jackson exhaled sharply. Oh, hell no. 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 I don't like that phrasing at all. Gia tapped the paper. So whatever's down there, it makes copies. But why? Why only some people? Why Michael? Jackson flipped through the pages, his breath catching as he found another note scribbled in the margins. It does not kill. It does not take. It burrows. He felt a chill crawl up his spine. The thing in the mine wasn't stealing people. It was replacing them. Michael had been let go, but only part of him had come back. The rest? Still down there. Gia turned to him, her face pale. We need to see that mine. Jackson groaned. Of course we do. The entrance to the mine lay beneath Michael's grave. Which meant one thing, they had to dig. It took hours. Their arms ached, their hands blistered, but they finally hit something solid, an old wooden plank, half-rotted but still intact. Jackson wedged his crowbar underneath and pried it open. A cold, foul air rushed upward from the darkness below. Gia gagged. Oh God. That smells like a basement full of dead Michaels? Jackson finished, wiping sweat from his forehead. Yeah. Awesome. Love that for us. With only their phone flashlights, they descended into the pit. The air felt wrong, thick, heavy, like it was pressing against their skin. And then, they saw them. The walls weren't stone. They were covered in faces. Hundreds of them. Mouths open in silent screams. Eyes wide, pleading. Jackson choked. Oh. No. Nope. I reject this reality. Gia grabbed his wrist, her nails digging into his skin. Jackson. Look. At the far end of the tunnel, a shadow shifted and stepped forward. It looked like Michael. But it wasn't. Its face shifted, features melting and reforming like wax. Sometimes Michael. Sometimes others. People from old photos. People from nowhere. And then it spoke, not in words. In voices. Dozens. Hundreds. Overlapping, whispering, laughing, screaming. Jackson and Gia froze. The thing lifted a hand, its fingers stretching too long, too thin. It pointed at them. And then, with a voice that sounded eerily like Jackson's, it whispered. Another will come. The walls shuddered. The faces groaned. The ground cracked. Gia grabbed Jackson's arm. Run! They bolted back up the tunnel, scrambling for the surface. The ground heaved beneath them as something massive shifted below. As they reached the surface, Jackson grabbed the bag of quick-dry cement they had brought, just in case. He poured every last drop into the hole, sealing the entrance for good. They stood there, panting, covered in sweat and dirt. Gia wiped her face. That was the worst thing I've ever done. Jackson nodded. Agreed. New rule, never dig up graves. Ever. They turned to leave, but then Gia stopped. Her eyes widened. She was staring at the car window. Her reflection. It wasn't moving. It smiled. And somewhere, far below, in the darkness of the mine, something else woke up.